back. I'm really excited to have this guest with us today. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell everyone who you are and your role in the adoption world?
Sure. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. My name is Angie Gillen. I'm the outreach coordinator for the Salvation Army Children's Services. We're a private nonprofit foster care and adoption agency in Allentown, Pennsylvania.
How exactly does the foster care system work? I understand that the Salvation Army has their own branch of foster care. And how are the children placed with these different organizations?
That's a great question. So the federal government makes laws and policies and regulations about foster care and adoption. And then every state has to follow those laws and regulations. But then each state also gets to make their own regulations and laws on top of those. In Pennsylvania, the state delegates a lot of authority to each county. So there are 67 counties in Pennsylvania, and each county runs the child welfare system a little bit differently. And everyone has to adhere, to the Pennsylvania regulations and to the federal ones, but they also kind of get to make up their own policies and their own way of doing things within those regulations. And several counties contract with private agencies like ours to recruit and to train and to certify foster and adoptive families. When a child comes into foster care, it's the County Children and Youth Agency in Pennsylvania who bring them into foster care along with the family courts. And then when a child needs a home, they reach out to an agency like ours in many cases and say, we have a little boy and he's 8 years old, he just came into care and he needs a home. Do you have a family available? And then we look to see what families we have open with space in their homes who would be a good fit for the little boy. And then he would be placed in our foster home.
What happens to the child if there are no foster homes available?
So if a child comes into care and there's nowhere for them to be placed, a lot of times, depending on which county they're with, they sleep at the county. I know that some counties have space in their county building for the child to sleep for a night, or they have a special meeting place where the child sleeps for a night. There are shelters where children can stay, and there are group homes, which are sort of like dormitories. But ideally, every child is placed in a family home.
What does the process look like for the foster parents? Can they adopt right away, or how long does it take for them to be able to adopt?
When families come to us to bring a child into their home, they can choose whether they would like to be foster parents or whether they would like to be adoptive parents. Foster parents come into the child welfare system bringing kids into their home, and they're part of the reunification process. Because when a child comes into foster care, the first goal is to get them back with their family, to restore that birth family, to help fix whatever problems there were in the home, whatever struggles the family was having. So foster parents are part of that process. Sometimes children are in care for more than a year and things are not going well. The issues that were going on in the birth family's home are not resolving and it's still not safe. And eventually the county might need to terminate the parents' rights and find an adoptive family for the child. Some foster parents are willing to be a permanent resource for children that are staying in their home, and that means they're willing to be their adoptive forever family. Some foster parents are really there specifically to be part of that reunification process. And other families come in and come through our process, and they are interested in what we call matching adoption. And in Pennsylvania, there are about 3,000 children whose parents' rights have already been terminated or will be terminated once an adoptive family is found. And they're just lingering in care. They're waiting in foster care for a permanent family. So some families come through and they are looking to be matched with one of those nearly 3,000 children. Sometimes it takes families up to a year to be matched with a child. And then it's really nice once they are matched with a child, they start by having casual visits, like maybe they'll go mini golfing or go bowling and they'll get to know one another. And then if everything keeps going well, they have longer visits. And then eventually the child gets to move into their home. And then they're in the home for 6 months before an adoption can happen. And that gives everyone time to get any services in place that the child needs, make sure that the child is safe, the child is happy, because the children that get adopted absolutely 100% are able to say, yes, I do want this family to adopt me, or no, I do not.
Or what are the exact legal processes that prospective foster parents or current foster parents have to take in order to foster and adopt?
So the process is very similar. They basically go through the same process no matter what service they're open to, whether they're just strictly being foster parents or whether they're adopting. There's a little bit of stuff on the back end that we have to do that it doesn't really affect things for the family. But the process involves, first they do an orientation, and that just gives them an overview of the child welfare system, because it can be complicated, and we think it's important that families understand the child welfare system before they start the process. They go through a whole bunch of training. We have them fill out lots of information for us. One of the things we have them do for us is fill out a reasons for fostering or adopting checklist, so that we understand what their motivations are, what their thoughts are behind adopting, and so that we know what they expect, because sometimes people have unrealistic expectations. They have to do background checks, so they have to do a police background check for Pennsylvania, a child abuse clearance for Pennsylvania, and that checks to make sure they have no child abuse record in the state. They have to do an FBI background check, and that checks to make sure that they don't have a criminal record in any state other than Pennsylvania. And then if they've lived in another state within the past 5 years, they have to do child abuse background checks in those states as well. We do home visits with them. We check out the safety of their home. We do in-person training. We interview them. They have to provide references for us. We ask them to send out 6 references for people who can talk about whether or not they can provide a good and safe home for children. And they have to have physical exams as well, so we can make sure that they're healthy and that they're physically able to take care of children.
How long does this process usually take? And what about the prices involved? A lot of these background checks are very extensive. So do foster parents have to pay for that? And in addition to that, are they being paid to foster? And one more scenario, when they do decide to adopt, do they have to pay for that as well?
Oh, that's a wonderful question. Adopting from child welfare system is almost completely free, and becoming a foster parent is almost completely free. Our agency does have the families pay for their clearances. One of the reasons for that is because many people start the process and then they decide for whatever reason that they're not going to continue with it. So because we are a nonprofit, we try to be good stewards of the money that people donate to us, and we want to make sure that we're using it in the best way we can. So we have families pay for their clearances. The clearances are they're a little over $23 for the FBI, and they're between $10 and $20 for the child abuse clearance and the police clearance. So they're not very expensive. And then for their physical exam, families either pay out of pocket or pay their copay for those. And then the only other thing they have to pay for licensing is if they have well water. Some people don't get their water from town. They have a well in their yard, and that water has to be tested so we can make sure that it's safe for children to drink. But those are the only fees that families pay to be licensed. The process for being licensed takes between 2 to 3 months. Families who are very, very motivated can get it done in 2 months. 3 months is a pretty standard pace. Some families take longer. We've had families who have inquired 2 years ago and they're just finishing up now. So you can go at a pace that's comfortable for you. Sometimes things just come up in life and you have to put things on hold. If you move towards adoption and you finalize an adoption for a child, the statewide adoption and permanency network gives a family $1,500 to cover one-time only adoption expenses. So that typically covers the attorney fees and court costs that go along with an adoption finalization. So the adoption itself costs almost nothing if you adopt a child from Pennsylvania. The reason our home study is free to families as well is also because of the statewide adoption and permanency network, or SWAN. They pay agencies to do home studies to try to help, encourage families to welcome children from the child welfare system into their home. Families who foster have a stipend. They receive a per diem amount from our agency. It's paid to us by the county. So part of it goes for our services, and then part of it goes to the family to help pay for the care and welfare of the children. So anytime you bring a child into your home, it's definitely an expense. Kids are expensive no matter what age they are, babies to teens. And so we don't want anybody to be, we want to take as much stress off of families who are caring for children as possible, because caring for children from the foster care system, it's not just about bringing a child into your home and giving them love in a safe place. It's also about helping them heal and helping them process some really traumatic stuff. And we want our families to be able to focus on that. So they do get a stipend to help support the child. They get medical assistance. So every child in foster care has a medical assistance card. So the family never has to worry about medical costs for the child. That's always something that's covered. And the family never has to worry that that child won't be able to get medical care. And then if you have a child under 5, they're also eligible to receive WIC. So that's women, infants, and children. And that's for babies, you get formula. They weigh the babies regularly to make sure they're growing well. And then as the children get older, they take away the formula, obviously, and add in things like milk and cheese and things like that. If they are working parents and they need to put the child into daycare, the county helps pay for that. So there is a lot of support. And even after a family adopts, sometimes there's an additional an adoption subsidy that continues, and the children continue to get the medical assistance card until they reach adulthood. And then they also are eligible for any kind of services they need for the rest of that child's childhood. So if their child in later years is struggling, needs counseling or therapy or support, that's available to them at no cost.
My brain was literally just
Yeah, I know.
So as it was turning, when I Google how much does an adoption cost, it says nearly $43,000, and that's almost the average income of the average American. Right. So why are all of these websites and statistical pages showing that it costs that much money when it really doesn't, according to you?
It's because they're only talking about private infant or international adoption. They're not taking child welfare into account. Child welfare adoption is definitely different. So families who specifically want to adopt are often nervous about being foster parents. They're nervous because, these children, clearly the goal is to get them back with their birth family or with their family. And so there's the fear of your heart being broken when they leave. So many people are not open to being foster parents because of that. But as I said before, there are almost 3,000 children in Pennsylvania who are just waiting to be adopted. I once was a recruiter for some of those children, and I was recruiting for a little boy who was 10, and he did not get adopted until he was 18. So he waited for 8 years. So there are many children, but they're older children typically. Then for some reason, those sites leave out the adoption of all of these other older kids who are just waiting. And I think that many, many people don't understand that it is practically free to adopt a child from the Pennsylvania child welfare system.
Adding on to that and the misconceptions, media plays a very big role, as we were mentioning with the websites that are saying these statistics. Is the media portraying foster care in a wrong way?
As I mentioned before, different states run their child welfare systems very differently. I think the child welfare system is a really complicated system, and there are definitely failures and missteps. And part of the reason is because we're dealing with humans, and it takes, the way I like to explain it is, if you have a clay flower pot and you drop it on the rug, on the floor, it might break, but you can probably take that broken piece and glue it back on, and the pot will look pretty much the same. But if you take that same flower pot and you drop it on a cement floor, it will shatter. And if you try to glue those pieces back together, it's not going to look quite the same. It might be a lot harder to glue it back together than just a small broken off piece. And that's sort of what we're dealing with um, when a family is broken and their children have to come into foster care. That is such a shattered, such a fractured situation that it takes a lot to try to put the pieces back together and fix it. And what professionals in the child welfare system think is the most important goal for any child that comes into foster care is permanency. So permanency means that they are no longer foster children. We don't want children to be foster children for 10 or 15 years. We want them to be able to either move back home, move in with another family member, or be adopted if they can't be reunified. Reunification is always the first goal, except for some situations where there were extreme problems. There are always things that go wrong. There are situations that you thought would turn out one way and turn out another way. Social service in general, when you're a social worker, whether you're dealing with drug and alcohol treatment or domestic violence survivors or child welfare, every single situation is a complete wild card because no two human beings are the same. No two human beings have the same background. We do all of this work to try to match children with the right families and make sure that that child and that home are a good fit for one another. And despite all of the work we do, sometimes they're not a good fit and that placement disrupts. There are definitely struggles. I've worked in child welfare in different ways for about 13 years. And I will tell you that I've never encountered someone who wasn't working to try to help kids. Instant Family did a really good job getting it right about adoption and what it's like for children when they come into your home. And they didn't paint the picture as something that was just perfect and serene, and the children weren't super grateful to have a home. It was the children were scared and they needed a lot of support and help.
How is the foster care system, specifically yours, being impacted by COVID-19, and what can all of our viewers here do to help out in any way?
Well, it's been really challenging. We're so grateful for our foster families. A lot of, just like every other family, we have foster parents where they're two-parent working families, where they're single parents who work, and they counted on things like school and childcare to be able to do their jobs and still care for their children. So that's been very disrupted for them. They are now having to, just like everyone else, find ways to juggle many different things that they weren't expecting to have to juggle. Our caseworkers, the therapists, they're all doing meetings with the families and the children via Zoom, and children are having meetings with their birth families as well. But our foster families are doing it for other kids. They're doing it for kids. I don't know how to articulate the distinction, but they signed up for this. They signed up to help kids, and now they're helping kids in a really unusual and stressful situation, and they're going strong. I know that right now we're doing a superhero challenge with like random acts of kindness, and we're encouraging people just to go out, do random acts of kindness, and kind of spread it around and challenge their friends to do them as well. And I think those are the kinds of things that our foster families could use now. When foster families know that they have the support of the community behind them, it encourages them to keep doing what they do. Anybody who wants to help foster kids or foster parents during this time, please reach out to us, because we can find out from our caseworkers who are talking with these families regularly via Zoom what exactly they need and the little things that might be helpful to them.
Can parents now, or just any couples who aren't fostering or don't have any children at the moment, or they do, can they sign up to foster right now?
Yes, absolutely. We actually I've been running Zoom orientations about every other week, and they've been really well attended. Because the Salvation Army Children's Services has our training and our application items are all online already. So it was a very simple transition for us to keep the licensing process going, even though we have to be remote. The only thing we can't do is, obviously, we can't certify anybody completely, because we do have to come to folks' homes and see their homes and do safety check. But we can do every other step besides that virtually. We've had the most amazing families created from all different kinds of families. And I just want to say too that there are all different kinds of children out there. And so a one size fits all kind of family isn't a thing that works.
I love that. That's a great note to end on.
Okay.
So I wanted to thank you again so much for joining me. Are there any last words of inspiration or wisdom you would like to give to everyone watching?
I would just like to, first of all, thank you. What you're doing now is, I talk about people being ambassadors for foster care and adoption, and that's what you're doing now. You're going out there and you're helping to dispel some really common myths that I think prevent amazing people from coming forward and being foster parents. There are between 15 and 17,000 children in foster care in Pennsylvania, and that's more than there are in the entire Pittsburgh school district. And so families are constantly needed. And I know that people worry because foster children have, they come from trauma. So there are struggles, but the children that we serve are amazing, amazing kids. They have every bit of the potential that any other child has. They have great senses of humor. They're smart, they're funny, they're clever, and they're a joy. And just like any other child, you're going to have struggles. But I just encourage anyone who's even thinking about it to reach out to me and ask questions. I'm always happy to help.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much.